The rain tapped gently on the rooftop of the luxury Sable Crown Hotel in downtown Chicago, a glass and marble giant known for its elegance and five-star reputation. Inside the polished lobby, the usual hum of wealth lingered. Soft jazz music, bellhops moving with quiet grace, and polished guests sipping espresso while scrolling through their phones. No one paid much attention when the front doors opened and a soaked black woman stepped inside, her umbrella dripping at her side, her curls matted from the storm. She wore no flashy jewelry, no designer logo on her coat, no security detail, only calm poise and a leather briefcase. But in the next few minutes, this woman, Simone Langston, the CEO and majority owner of the Sable Crown Hotel Group, would become the center of a lesson the entire world would remember. Simone had built this empire from the ground up. The daughter of a janitor and a public school teacher from Detroit, she had worked 2 jobs through college, faced doors slammed shut because of her skin color, and outlasted every silent boardroom glance and dismissive handshake. She was now one of the few black female CEOs in the American luxury hospitality industry. But on that rainy Tuesday, she walked into her flagship hotel looking like just another guest to the front desk staff. And that made all the difference. "Ma'am," the receptionist said as Simone stepped up to the desk, "this area is for guests only." The woman didn't even glance up. Simone calmly said, "I know. I'm here for a 2 p.m. site meeting in the executive lounge." The receptionist finally looked up, blinked at Simone's brown skin and modest clothes, and smirked. "That lounge is reserved for owners and VIP clients, ma'am. Please wait in the cafe until your boss arrives." A manager nearby and watching walked over, not to correct the situation but to reinforce it. "Miss," he said, gently herding her aside, "this hotel maintains a professional standard. If you're delivering something, please go through the service entrance." In that moment, Simone felt a sting she hadn't felt in years, not of embarrassment, but of pure clarity. She watched the staff, all composed, professional, and utterly blind to who she was. And it wasn't just ignorance, it was prejudice. She saw it in their stiff posture, the clipped tone, the subtle detachment reserved only for people like her, people they didn't think belonged in the world they were paid to polish. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't flash credentials. She only asked softly, "Are you certain this is how you treat all your guests?" The manager gave her a tight smile. "Standards apply to everyone." 5 minutes later, everything changed. Her assistant burst into the lobby, umbrella flailing, voice urgent. "Ms. Langston, I'm so sorry I'm late. The storm's been wild." The front desk snapped to it. "Ms. Langston!" The receptionist's face paled. The manager's jaw dropped. Simone gave them both a calm, piercing look and said, "Yes, that's me, and we need to talk. Privately. Now." What followed was not a scene, but a reckoning. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She asked one simple question behind the glass doors of the boardroom. "If I had been a white man in a suit, would I have been turned away?" The silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Then she opened her briefcase, pulled out a file labeled Incident Evaluation, Staff Ethics, and calmly began to read. The boardroom was cold and clinical, its walls lined with framed awards and photographs of ribbon cuttings and press events. Most of the images featured well-dressed men in suits. Few, if any, reflected diversity. Simone Langston sat at the head of the table now, not as a stranger, but as the undisputed owner of the Sable Crown Empire. Her assistant, a young Latina woman named Maria, handed her a digital tablet displaying the hotel's recent guest experience reviews. Simone's expression remained unreadable. Across from her sat the manager, Mr. Dalton, his hands trembling slightly. The receptionist, whose badge now clearly read Chloe, stood in the corner, stiff and pale. "Miss Langston," Dalton began, "I deeply apologize for the misunderstanding. I assure you." Simone held up a hand. "This isn't about apologies, Mr. Dalton. It's about accountability. You see, what happened today isn't unique. It's habitual. It's systemic." She turned the tablet toward him. "This," she said, "is a complaint from a guest last month. A black professor who was asked to show room proof 3 times in one day. This one here, an Indian couple denied valet service. This one, a young woman in a hijab, seated far from the windows at breakfast, so other guests wouldn't be uncomfortable. All logged, all ignored." Chloe's eyes began to water. Dalton swallowed hard. Simone continued, "And then today, a CEO, your CEO, was told to use the service entrance because you made a judgment based not on my credentials, not on my actions, but on my appearance." She leaned forward, voice low and steady. "Do you understand how dangerous that is?"
Neither of them spoke. And then, for the first time, Simone's voice broke, not with anger, but with emotion. "My father worked cleaning floors in hotels like this. He was spit on, called names, told to be invisible. Do you know what he told me before he died?" She paused, her voice catching. "Make them see you, even if they don't want to." Simone stood, straightened her jacket and said, "I'm implementing a full audit of every employee's training history, behavior logs, and complaint follow-ups. But let me be very clear. Effective immediately," she looked directly at Dalton and Chloe, "you're both relieved of your positions. Kindly hand over your badges to HR before leaving." Their mouths opened in protest, but her assistant was already on the phone calling security. Not to create a scene, but to ensure order. She wasn't humiliating them. She was protecting the future of the hotel. Because this wasn't just about her. It was about every guest who'd ever been made to feel lesser. Simone left the boardroom without another word. Stepping back into the lobby she now claimed fully as her own, not just in title, but in spirit. The staff turned to watch her, stunned. And when she paused by the front desk to speak to a young, quiet housekeeper named Tasha, she smiled for the first time all day. "You're new?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," the girl said nervously. "First week." Simone nodded. "Good. Let's make sure this hotel finally starts reflecting the world we live in, not the one it's been pretending to serve." As the sun began to set behind the Manhattan skyline, the lobby of the Sable Crown Hotel looked just as it always did. Gold-trimmed marble, glass chandeliers, and polished silence. But something in the air had changed. The usual murmur of conversations was replaced by a stillness. Employees whispered among themselves. Word of what had just happened, who Simone really was, what she'd done, spread like wildfire. Tasha, the young housekeeper Simone had spoken to earlier, stood by a pillar with wide eyes. She'd never met a CEO who spoke kindly, let alone one who took the time to learn her name. Most guests barely noticed the cleaning staff, but this woman had looked her in the eye. It meant something. Meanwhile, upstairs in one of the suites, an elderly black couple, the Hendersons, sat watching the local news. Mr. Henderson shook his head as he saw the hotel's logo on the screen. "They kicked her out of her own building," he muttered. "Still happening in 2025. His wife touched his hand. But she stood up. She fired them. That's something. Their granddaughter, a journalism student, started typing rapidly on her phone. The story was just beginning to take flight online. Back in her office, Simone wasn't celebrating. She was thinking. The firings were only the first step.
The root of the problem went deeper than 2 employees. She pulled out an old file from the drawer labeled Legacy Notes, a file her father started when she was still in college. Inside were blueprints for how the hotel could become a model of equity. Inclusive hiring, mentorship programs, community partnerships, even mental health support for staff. She remembered him scribbling ideas in the margins while he polished brass railings. "One day these people are gonna need you," he'd said, "and you'll be ready." She was. Simone walked out to the staff lounge, where a mix of housekeepers, cooks, maintenance workers, and junior receptionists had gathered. Some looked nervous, others looked hopeful. She stood at the center. No podium, no microphone, just her voice. "I know today was intense," she began. "I didn't expect it either. But the truth is, I've been watching this place long before you knew who I was. Not just from the boardroom, but from the sidewalk, the guest rooms, the break rooms. I know what it's like to be treated as less, by people who believe uniforms define your worth." A man from maintenance nodded silently. He'd once been asked to take the freight elevator when delivering a wedding bouquet to the ballroom. "This place has potential," Simone continued, "but only if we build it together. If we see each other, not as labels or roles, but as human beings with stories, families, and dreams." She looked around. "So, starting tomorrow, no more silence. I want to hear from you. What's broken? What's unfair? What would make this place feel like it belongs to all of us?" A timid cook raised her hand. "Can we have a suggestion box that actually gets read?" Simone smiled. "No box needed. You've got my email. Direct line." The room slowly filled with applause, not the loud, forced kind, but the quiet, meaningful kind that comes when people feel seen for the first time. Outside, the headlines were catching fire. "Black woman CEO, booted from her own hotel, responds with dignity and power." "Real justice. CEO exposes bias in luxury industry." The face of modern leadership, Simone Langston's story goes viral. But inside those marble walls, something more powerful was happening. Employees were talking, listening, reconnecting. And for the first time in years, the Sable Crown felt like it could truly become what Simone's father had always dreamed of. Not just the most luxurious hotel in New York, but the most human. The next morning, Simone arrived early. Earlier than the chefs, earlier than the receptionists. The sun hadn't even touched the skyline yet. She stood in the grand lobby of the Sable Crown, wearing a plain black blazer and flats. No bodyguards, no entourage, just her presence. A newly hired receptionist, nervous and fresh out of hospitality school, approached her. "Miss Langston?" she asked softly. Simone smiled. "Simone's fine. You're Mia, right?" The young woman's eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't think you'd remember my name." "I remember people who show up ready to work with heart," Simone replied. "We're building something different now." While a cleaning crew scrubbed the gold-leaf floors and the elevators hummed gently, Simone moved through the staff areas, shaking hands, listening to stories, hearing concerns. An older dishwasher named Hector told her how he'd been doing double shifts without overtime pay. A housekeeper named Janelle confessed she'd once been disciplined for helping a lost guest instead of staying in her lane. Simone took notes, not just to file them away, but to act on them. Her notebook wasn't leather-bound. It was a weathered spiral, pages crinkled at the edges. But the contents? It was the future of her company. By noon, she called a full staff meeting in the ballroom. The same ballroom that had hosted celebrities and billionaires now held waitstaff, janitors, concierge workers, and engineers. Some still wore their aprons. Others clutched time cards. All of them carried years of quiet stories no one had ever asked to hear. Simone stood before them, not behind a podium, but on the same level. She took a deep breath and began. "I want to talk to you not as a CEO, but as a daughter." The room fell silent. "My father was the janitor here. He cleaned these very floors. He wore a name tag, not a title. But he taught me the most important thing I know. Dignity isn't something you earn from power. It's something you give to others, no matter who they are. She paused, letting it sink in. Yesterday, I was thrown out of my own hotel because someone assumed what I wasn't, without bothering to ask who I was. But what hurt more wasn't that moment. It was knowing that if it happened to me, it's probably happened to some of you, again and again. Heads nodded, eyes welled. Well, no more. That ends now. Applause broke. That ends now. Applause broke, this time louder, real, earned. Simone announced a new initiative called Sable Rising, a program that offered anonymous reporting of discrimination or mistreatment, leadership training for entry-level staff, quarterly bonuses tied to kindness scores from guests and colleagues alike, a mentorship program pairing executives with ground-level staff, and scholarship support for employees' children. The room erupted. Later that day, national news outlets ran headlines, "CEO turned cleaner's daughter changes the face of corporate justice. Simone Langston isn't just a CEO, she's a movement. Sable crown becomes symbol of dignity and inclusion." But Simone? She wasn't reading headlines. She was sitting in the cafeteria with Tasha and Hector, helping them fill out feedback forms. Because in a world where prejudice often speaks louder than principle, she chose to speak through action, not in rage, but in reform, not in vengeance, but in vision, not in shame, but in shared strength. And as evening fell over Manhattan, one of the bellboys passed by Simone and whispered, "Ma'am, I've never seen the staff smiling like this before." Simone just nodded. Now we rise. 3 days later, the man who had thrown Simone out of her own hotel, Gerald Morris, stood nervously outside the HR conference room. His face was tight with uncertainty, eyes darting toward the frosted glass door every time someone passed. His badge no longer worked. The power he used to wield with a glance was gone. He had seen the viral videos. He had read the articles, and he had realized something far more terrifying than losing a job. He had built his self-worth on the illusion of superiority, and it had crumbled overnight. Inside the room, Simone sat across from the head of HR, legal counsel, and a neutral mediator. She had called for one reason, not revenge, but clarity. Gerald was invited in. He hesitated at the threshold, then stepped in, head bowed. "Miss Langston," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Simone is fine," she replied calmly. A tense silence followed. "I'm not here to make you beg," she said, "but I do need to know one thing." "Why?" Gerald looked up, pained. "I thought you were just another troublemaker, dressed down, wandering where you didn't belong." "That's not an answer. That's a surface," Simone said. "Go deeper." His shoulders slumped. "Because I was taught people like you don't belong here, not in suits, not in ownership. And I hated the idea that someone like you could walk in and command a space I never felt secure in myself." Simone didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Thank you," she said. "That honesty is the beginning of your change, but it cannot undo what you've done to others before me. That's why we're moving forward without you. But I do hope you reflect and grow." Gerald nodded silently, tears in his eyes. He walked out, not with humiliation, but with the first seed of accountability. That afternoon, the lobby of the Sable Crown was different. It buzzed not just with wealth, but with warmth. Bellhops smiled with genuine pride. Front desk agents greeted guests with sincerity. A single mother from housekeeping now stood shadowing a floor supervisor as part of her new mentorship. And on the wall near the main entrance, a new plaque was installed. It read, "True royalty is not worn, it's lived. This hotel stands for dignity, equality, and the quiet courage of those who rise with grace. Simone Langston, CEO." Outside, it began to rain softly. Simone stood near the revolving door, watching the clouds descend over Manhattan. A little girl, her dress damp, tugged at her mother's hand near the entrance. They looked unsure whether to enter. Simone stepped forward, knelt to the child's eye level, and opened the door. "You're always welcome here," she said with a smile. Because in a world where prejudice had power for too long, a quiet revolution had begun. Not with fists, not with fire, but with fairness, empathy, and one woman who refused to let silence be mistaken for surrender. And that's how the woman who was kicked out of her own hotel rebuilt it, not just brick by brick, but heart by heart,